Part 3. Surely the bathrooms in Noah's Ark were constructed as if they were plantations.
So, it seemed it was necessary to revitalize the food chain through artificial means. With that in mind, they built their plantations within the white whale like factories. Advances in biotechnology had made it possible for them to produce more than just vegetables. They were even capable of synthesizing meats and fish. Of course, the official plans were managed by the authorities, and they kept a close watch on the circulation of food. But like I said, current technology even makes it possible to produce food in test tubes. A ton of illegal plants had sprung up, but the authorities saw them as necessary evil due to the food shortage plaguing the ship, and turned a blind eye. They went from microscopic experiments to large-scale operations in underground warehouses. The illegal plants were given the rather conspicuous title of factories. Mr. Tony had brought me to the largest factory in the city, nicknamed the Hacienda. This was my first time visiting a factory, but it wasn't because I was an upstanding citizen who only ever got ingredients directly from legitimate plants or anything. I'd only gone as far as Fisherman's Alley for those unofficial ingredients. I followed him deeper into the Hacienda, even though he'd only heard of it through friends of his that used to work nearby. He knew almost exactly where to go. Shocking, I know, but maybe he hadn't been so useless. In fact, he was almost starting to seem as competent as a high-ranking military officer. I didn't know the shop owner personally, but don't you think he'd feel uneasy coming to a place like this?
Well...
He suddenly stopped and looked at me while I shrugged. Beneath the city was a large space that served as the maintenance area for all its facilities, and it was there that the Hacienda had been built. I was surprised to find that such a whole open area even existed. It was well lit at all times of the day, too, so it didn't feel oppressive or gloomy or anything. But he didn't mean Mr. Jen would feel uneasy because of that. He was referring to the atmosphere. The graffiti-stained walls and constant booming music weren't exactly warming and inviting. In fact, the whole place seemed like some kind of gigantic underground nightclub. I know I wouldn't want to live there. The music and screaming kids, who were probably older than I was, made it all very unsettling. The only thing that came to mind about the butcher were his warm welcomes, so all I could do was shrug when asked if he'd feel at home here. It's a good place to hide, but I don't think he'd be very comfortable.
I suppose, but wouldn't he be even more out of place here than me?
Did you forget this was a factory? You know, a plant where they make meats and vegetables? He knows all sorts of stuff about synthesizing meat, so it's the perfect place for him to find some work.
Yeah, but...
Are you ever motivated to do anything? Whatever. I can handle things by myself, so just go back home. Thanks for everything. I bowed and turned away without meeting his eyes, and took off down the stairs that led further into the Hacienda. His constant pessimism and negativity had really gotten on my nerves. It felt like he'd been criticizing me the whole way here. I knew this was a long shot, but he didn't need to keep reminding me. It wasn't long before he came following after some quick deliberation.
Don't put me on the spot like that, Lynn. Arena asked me to keep an eye on you, and it's not like I have any home to go back to. Hey, wait up!
I sighed when I heard him finally on the verge of tears, and slowed my pace just a bit. The more you looked at it, the more bizarre the whole place looked. There were tanks full of raw materials and catalysts lined up next to each other, connected to a series of tubes that led this way and that. It certainly lived up to the name of factory, but the machinery and refrigerators you'd usually find in official plants were all moved out of the way. Instead, the whole place was set up like a giant bazaar. There were even street musicians banging on metal drums and amplifying their voices using devices I'd never seen before. I think the best way to describe it would be the slums of the industrial area in an air of decadence. But the people weren't lazy, and although they didn't follow the law, they must have followed some unspoken laws of their own. But most of all, despite it being a synthesis plant, it was somehow able to accommodate an enormous amount of people. It made the Hacienda feel like it had this intoxicating sort of glamour to it. We stopped at a quiet little cafe, far from the hustle and bustle of the main areas. Well, it wasn't totally quiet since you could hear the sounds of construction work being done nearby. The Hacienda was still expanding after all. Sounds like they're using dolls, huh? I wonder how they keep them running so well when they probably don't receive any official maintenance.
Oh yeah, you're part of the military's maintenance squad or something, aren't you?
That's right. So I'm not really familiar with detective work. I let out a sigh while I played around with my poorly made ice cream. We spent several hours drilling the people that came in for info, like some kind of police drama, but we didn't get a single lead. Maybe coming here to chase rumors was a dumb idea. Real detectives would have some clues to go on, but I didn't even know the guy's full name.
we barely made any progress. Don't you think it's about time to give up and head home? It's gotta be close to midnight above the ground.
What? It's already that late? This place has been so busy I can't even tell anymore.
The factories usually run non-stop. There are a lot of wannabe artists here, especially, and they hate following schedules. We're in the middle of space right now, and our clocks are controlled by the ship's main computer, so they think that ignoring the passage of time makes them free, like they're fighting back against the system.
That sounds silly. Are they hippies or something?
You're familiar with the term as old as that?
Not really, but those attempt to revive the movement again recently. Yeah, I guess I could see the appeal as to those kinds of people. This place certainly is surreal.
Surreal. That's a good way to put it.
He smiled like he was the butt of the joke. It kind of bothered me, like he was trying to show off. Now that I think about it, he'd been exaggerating things since I first met him. Even when he was acting all miserable during our escape, I bet he was doing it to cover for something. What exactly did you do to rack up enough debt that you had to sell your social ID to pay it off?
Huh?
I wanted to know really badly, but I knew it was a personal matter, so I wasn't going to pelt him with questions if he didn't want to answer, except he smiled at me. It was just another act, but it felt different than normal.
Despite my appearance, I was once a researcher who submitted a paper on life preservation technology for humans. You'll find that equipment related to my research is even being used aboard the ship. I managed to find success in my own way.
He suddenly stopped and turned his head away. He looked off into the distance like he was reminiscing about better days.
But I got so caught up in my own research that I ended up neglecting my family. I felt my wife divorced me. The only names left to my social ID were my own and the name of my daughter. I wasn't even allowed to see.
And that's why you were so careless with it.
Not entirely. I believed the day would come when the three of us would be able to live together again. So it was quite important to me. It was proof that we were a family. But then the event happened of several months after the divorce. The aliens fighting near the Earth that forced mankind to flee the planet.
His voice trailed off. I could tell that what he was going to say. As an accomplished researcher, he'd probably been given priority for boarding the white whale. The government had promised that they would treat everyone equally, of course, but it was clear they were prioritizing the safety of the most capable people, and Mr. Tony was probably one such priority. Those people who could easily abuse that privilege to have their family join them on the ships. Everyone knew it was happening behind the scenes, so naturally his family would have been allowed to join him aboard the white whale, had they not finalized the divorce several months prior.
The names of my wife and daughter weren't recorded on the ship's passenger log, but I scoured the ship for them anyway. I wasn't able to find any sign of them. So, they must have boarded a different ship. But how many of us had survived as many as the white whale had?
The moment he discovered they weren't aboard our ship, his social ID lost all meaning. It could have saved his family, but he never got the chance to use it. I can see why he'd just throw it away like he did. So you spent all that money searching for your family?
Well, yes and no. Most of the spending came after I lost hope, when I wallowed in wastefulness. It was easy to just give up on everything.
That's a really sad story.
No, it's just a pathetic one.
While the sounds of construction work droned on, my ice cream had melted into a goopy puddle. It looked exactly how I felt inside. Okay, but now don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think you need to move on. This caught his attention, and he turned back towards me. You should feel bad that you're wasting the life preservation equipment that was set aside for you on the ship, but you don't need to move on right away. It's just that giving up on your own life means giving up on your family.
Lynn.
He blinked in surprise, but he didn't give me any of his usual wells or buts, so I kept going. It's okay if you don't let go of the past, but please don't throw your life away. You can move on whenever you want. Just give it time and try again when you're ready. I beamed at his motionless stare. Inefficiency is part of human nature. Don't rush things. He was looking at me like I had gone bonkers. His stare finally brought me back to reality, and I felt a sudden wave of regret wash over me. Crap, what was I doing acting all smug like that? I was just repeating what my old doll piloting instructor told me, and to an accomplished adult no less. I always do this, open my big mouth without thinking things through. I really need to filter myself.
Lynn.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That was really inconsiderate. I didn't stop to think about your feelings, and I hadn't even tested out my own advice.
No, that's not...
For some reason, it was like he felt obligated to bow and apologize for my embarrassment, but that didn't calm me down. I covered my face with both hands, determined to keep it hidden, and then the cafe table gently rose from the ground. At first, I thought he put his hand on an unstable part of it, but I was wrong. A nearby chair fell into the ground as the cheap cafe counter tipped over. The violent sound surged on without giving us time to wonder what was happening. The construction noises from earlier wouldn't even compare to it. In an instant, everything in the cafe was sent tumbling over. I fell over on my stool and threw up my arms to protect my head. There was no sound of an explosion, so it didn't sound like any kind of bomb, but I needed to protect myself from any falling objects. But all that felt was a sprinkle of dust. I coughed while waiting to see what would happen, then slowly rose. Mr. Tony was nearby, similarly covered in dust. He didn't seem to be in any danger. All around us were overturned tables and chairs, the fallen counter, and... I gasped and jumped back as I noticed the gigantic thing in front of me. The dull sheen of an oil-stained rod, the sound of a still-running motor, and a rush of hot exhaust. Some sort of violent-looking mechanical thing was crouching in the cafe. It didn't look like any doll I'd ever seen before.
Part 4. Asking why dolls are shaped like humans is asking why gods were painted like humans.
It's easier to solve life's mysteries if you're able to use the human form as a key. Gods appeared as humans in religious paintings because it made them more relatable, and dolls were given arms and legs because it made it easier for humans to control the complex machines. So naturally, they were called dolls, being nothing more than obedient tools to satisfy our selfish needs. But the doll in front of me now was considered a nuisance by the two adults arguing over who was responsible for it.
The driver was trying to leave the job without permission, so the crash was his fault,
argued the foreman of the construction site.
The problem was caused by someone working for you, so it doesn't matter whether it happened on or off the job, argued
the owner of the store that had just been destroyed. They were arguing about the utility doll that had malfunctioned and fallen into the shop from the nearby construction site. The driver had already been sent to the hospital, and the dispute broke out while discussing who was responsible for moving it from the shop. Common sense would lead you to believe that the foreman was completely responsible, but the Cyndia didn't run on common sense. For starters, the expansion project wasn't even formally approved. The guy claiming to be the foreman just suddenly, or rather arbitrarily, started excavating, hoping to sell whatever space he managed to clear out. And the owner of the doll wasn't even his employee. He just started helping him on his own, assuming he would get a cut for the profits after the spot sold. So the foreman decided that it wasn't his problem. His story was full of holes, but apparently that's how people roll here in the Ascendia. It was full of people who used uncommon sense, looking down on responsibilities and contracts. In the end, the foreman said,
"Just accept that it was bad luck that the thing fell on your shop."
Of course, that didn't sit well with the cafe owner, who grabbed the foreman by the shirt collar. I saw a glint of light from something in the owner's hand. That must have been the bread knife he'd been using to cut the sandwiches. I immediately jumped up to stop him. Mr. Tony had the same idea, and we both rushed over and shoved away between them to stop the fight. "Stop it, that's a kitchen utensil, not a prison shank." But the cafe owner was shouting things like,
"If I back down now, I'll never live it down.
And
who does this punk think he is mapping up on my turf?"
He sounded like some greasy mafia guy. "If it's ruining your lives that much, then let me try to get the doll out of here," I shouted at the top of my lungs, causing the cafe owner to stop short. His momentum tilted his head forward, and I looked up at him.
"Really?"
he asked, and the foreman he'd been arguing with also asked,
"Can you really do that, little miss?"
"If I just have to get this thing out of your way, it shouldn't take me that long."
"Oh, that would be a huge help,"
they chimed in unison. The two men that had just been at each other's throats were now smiling at me. Neither of them had to take any responsibility, so they looked like they had just dodged a bullet.
"I'd really appreciate it even if you just moved it out of here. That way, I don't have to deal with this obnoxious owners,"
said the foreman. According to him, the owners had made a lot of bizarre modifications to it, so he probably won't be able to sell it off to anyone anyway. Bizarre modifications? The doll had participated in some kind of irregularly scheduled fighting tournament in Ascendia, and all of the modifications made it unfit for construction work. I was surprised to hear about the tournament, but more importantly, I was surprised to hear, "Oh, there's a prize for the winner, and you're saying it's what? The prize is some grade A synthetic meat, fake Kobe beef?" Like I thought, the damage to the doll wasn't all that serious. We didn't have any trouble getting the doll back on its feet, and before long we managed to get out of the shop. The doll itself was a Formula Series frame like they used in the military, but it had passed hands between a load of crazy people. They had modified it as far as the base frame, and now its arms made it look like a gorilla. It certainly looked suited for manual labor, which was probably why it was being used at the construction site, but on closer examination, all the extra weight was focused in the arms, without any consideration for the overall balance. No wonder it fell over. Eventually, I found a place to set the doll down and checked out its status from the cockpit. The modifications were super gross, but the frame itself seemed like it was in decent shape, and the repairs wouldn't require any major work.
Are you sure about this, Lynn?
Came Mr. Tony's voice from outside. I shouted back at him through the open cockpit while continuing to work. Of course! Why else wouldn't I be sitting here? I reiterated my recent decision that I would be entering the tournament called bottoming. I need to get my hands on that meat. After playing through the net, I had to go to get permission to use the doll from its owner. I told him I'd give him a discount on the repairs and towing fees, so he'd let me rent it for free, but it seemed like the heavily modified frame was too much for him, so even though I was only renting it, it was more like he was giving it away to me, which meant I was allowed to do anything I wanted with it. I could barely contain my excitement at getting to enter the tournament, and started working on my own modifications immediately.
But I don't think this is such a good idea.
Look, this is my best chance at getting some meat now that the butcher's trail has gone cold. I'm an expert on dolls anyway, so I know what I'm doing. A doubtful silence hung in the air after my triumphant proclamation. He sighed, eventually giving in.
Jeez, you're always like this?
He said as he flopped down onto the bumper in front of the cockpit.
I don't know if you're optimistic or just really stubborn. Well, I guess I'm pretty stubborn myself.
Peeking out from the cockpit, I saw him make another pathetic face. I was a big fan of his melodrama, but it's not like he was doing it on purpose. It was just something he did subconsciously now. Thinking about all he's been through, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. By the way, can you pilot a doll?
Pilot? I've only ever driven them as a hobby.
When did you do that?
Maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
I see. We gotta get your piloting skills back into shape before the day of the bottoming then.
Huh? Hang on, you want me to do it?
He asked as he craned his neck to look inside the cockpit. Bottoming is like, duking it out with other dolls at point blank. You have a pilot and a second, and proper coordination between them can mean the difference between the winner's circle and the junkyard. As I continued explaining it to him, I saw the pain look on his face. I'm pretty sure I'm better at giving directions than you, so you'll be the pilot and I'll be your second.
But wouldn't it be better if you found a more capable pilot?
He gave me another of his signature butts and turned away. I stared at him as intensely as I could. I know I said you don't have to cheer up immediately, but I'm worried about what'll happen to you if you stay all depressed like this. Can't you just leave all your sadness behind? Get it out of your system all at once?
Lynn.
He turned back towards me. I wasn't trying to be selfish. I just wanted him to understand that I cared. I knew his depression wouldn't go away from just punching robots, as long as it helped him start getting better, so he'd be able to live his life to the fullest again.
Got it. Either way, I'm a waste of life. I'll do it even if it kills me.
I shook my head at him as he mumbled. Don't act like you're already dead inside. You only live once, so you should enjoy life to the fullest. He burst out laughing after that. Between chuckles, I heard him say,
Got it!
Again. Even I was surprised at how fast the remodeling repairs were going. I took care of the maintenance while Mr. Tony gathered up all the parts, but everyone in Hessendia seemed to want a piece of the action. When they heard about what they were doing, they all stopped by randomly to bring us junk parts. After a few days, our little workshop project had gathered quite the community. It was like a school field trip or a never-ending party. It was very cozy though. I talked, ate, and laughed with everyone that came by, and I was able to completely devote myself to this doll. Of course, I was able to keep in touch with HQ the whole time, but I think they were starting to spread rumors about me hanging out with here in illegal land, but I was doing it for the meat. I wasn't going home until I had that juicy goodness in my hands. Some of the people that stopped by had some information on our opponent, the reigning champion of bottoming. The frame he piloted, nicknamed the Crabman, was a repurposed construction doll, so obviously it was a really heavy weight. Nobody really cared about mobility since the arena that the competition took place in was so narrow. Whoever knocked the opponent over first would win, so everyone focused on making their dolls as heavy as possible. Crabman must have had some kind of enormous dinosaur of a doll, considering that everyone in the Ascendia was telling me about it. Originally, the bottling rules stated that once a contestant won 10 consecutive matches, they would become the champion. But now all you had to do was knock out the current champ. He was getting bored with the old prizes, so he insisted that the current one be meat. I decided that the champion must be some kind of gigantic food lover. I couldn't let myself lose to him, being a food lover myself. Everything was going smoothly thanks to everyone's help, and we finished the remodeling work early. It was time to make our debut. I dubbed our newly finished frame New Order. As long as you were ready, you didn't have to wait to fight. I immediately challenged the Crabman team to a bottling match. Entrants could send these so-called written challenges whenever they wanted. So if the champion accepted, then the bottling match would be held that same day. It didn't take long to get a reply from them accepting the challenge. We all made our way to the battle menu with New Order, like a giant parade. The battlegrounds were in the very center of the Ascendia. I had heard that it was originally a vacant lot used to store raw materials, but the space now had a steel fence separating the arena from the guest seats along the outside. There were already a huge crowd gathered, shouting and cheering loudly. We headed over to the challenger's corner to wait for the match to start. I could almost make out the Crabman in the opposite champion's corner. It was difficult to see through the fence, but the dinosaur-like silhouette didn't seem too far from the image I had in my head. I stepped up to look into the cockpit and addressed Mr. Tony. "Are you nervous?"
Extremely.
"Don't worry, if you can just make it through the beginning, it's in the bag. I made sure the frame was super balanced."
Well, I'll see what I can do. There's also that secret weapon thing you added.
"What? Oh, that thing? It was just something I added in for fun, so I wouldn't count on it to bring you any miracles," I said as the siren signaled the seconds to step away from the doll sounded. I stopped talking and gave him a thumbs up and got ready to jump down, and then I heard his soft voice.
Lynn!
"Yes?" I stopped halfway off the step and looked up at him as he stuck his head out of the cockpit.
My daughter was the same age as you. I'm not trying to replace her with you, but I think I can live on thanks to you.
This might not have been the best time to go on saying something like that, but hearing him speak so honestly made me really happy. "I'm glad I was able to help,"
Thank you, Lynn.
he said as he vanished inside the cockpit. I jumped down into the ground as New Order whirred to life and moved towards the center of the arena. I thought about what he just said as I saw him off. "I can live on thanks to you." "I see. I guess people don't live just so they can eat. Isn't that right, Mr. Tony?"
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of 24-hour Happy People. Short, simple, and more on the comedic side compared to the last unused X story. However, overall though, I feel like this is a pretty cool concept.
Yeah, I was surprised. Like, scales are not just there to fight. You can do like sporting events with them. It's like, wow.
And I kind of like the concept of NLA having this underground, like, sneaky area, which like drugs and offhanded work and illegal street fights can take place. It shows. Granted, I can see why this was taken out of the base game, because illegal street fights, in a sleazy underground, it doesn't really paint the pretty picture of like only the best of the best humans ever made it onto the white whale. Nope, no criminals, no drugs or anything here. Although, to be fair, the game itself undermines it, but this I feel like would have been like a nice piece of A, world building, and B, a bit of like, I don't know, a bonus thing which you could partake in the game.
Yeah.
It would have been a nice area to explore, like the vastness of Mira, but also to see every element of NLA.
Yeah, because like in the game you can like go to that console and do like the Telephia plume or whatever it is, and spend like many hours testing out your build, and you can also grind and do affinity grinding in that. I think they could have used this whole scale competition thing as part of that instead.
Maybe. It's also one of the reasons why that if a sequel ever happens, I'm hoping that it focuses more on Elma and the whole mystery of Mira, but also like her journey, like for understanding and going through humanity. Because I just don't know. I'd like Elma discovering like the sleazy side of NLA. I don't know. It would be kind of nice.
Yeah, because if you play the game, Elma says like, all of humanity, I trust them, and they've got good intentions.
Which again, the game undermines immensely in every side quest. But hey ho, that's a video and a topic for another day. All in all, though, that was a pretty enjoyable story, and it gave Lynn a bit of a spotlight without Totsu, and I think that's something that she absolutely deserves. But on that note, guys, what did you think, and what are your thoughts on the story? And you know what? What are your thoughts on X getting a sequel in general? But as always, if you like this video, be sure to like it. Didn't like it? Well then. You can go down to the slums, as it were. But if you want to subscribe to see more content like this, then be sure to subscribe. And is there any other Xenoblade stories in which we haven't read, or stories in general which you would like us to read and just have a look at? By all means, put them in the comments, as always. But
it'd be preferable if they were canon. I don't think we'd be reading any fan fictions on here.
I'm giving my wife a look. I'm giving my wife an immense look. You have no idea. But as always, guys, thank you very, very much for watching, and thank you very much for your time. As always, I've been Lightning.
I'm Alice.
And we've been LightlicePlays. Thank you for watching. Or listening. ASMR. Xenoblade.
Not really ASMR when it's my voice at the helm.
That's because you're not parting enough. Oh yeah. That's what you need. Have that talk.
Or carbonation.
Content.